everybody. My name is Brandon Amalani. Hope you're doing well. I'm really excited for this interview today that I'm about to introduce. I had the privilege of sitting down and having a conversation with Terry Stotyn from Sign Tamer, and we go deep into the dirty electricity thing. Been wanting to do kind of a deep dive for years because a lot of the surface level information that you see online is just, I think, fairly inadequate. So in this interview, we talk about dirty electricity, transients on the line in your house, but it's not just about extra hypersensitive or EMF related mitigation. It's really about like talking about electronics and how to protect your electronics, what electricity actually is, how all of these things work on the hot lines, the neutral and the ground. We talk about certain capacitance-based dirty electricity filters, the type that you plug into your outlets all over the house, and why that might be actually causing more of a problem than you think. We talk about kill switches in relation to the neutral line. We talk about AMI meters and handheld meters and why that's not really useful. Really just didn't give you a lot of data, and we go deep dive into the oscilloscopes and high pass filters and all this kind of stuff. Talk about smart meters in depth, which is really cool. So this is just a really jam-packed episode that we recorded today. It's about 90 minutes long, so it's on the longer side, but I think you're not going to want to miss any of this if you're really interested in dirty electricity and how to like protect your family and your electronics from this pernicious type of radiation in the environment. So without further ado, here's myself and Terry talking about dirty electricity. I'm really excited to talk to you because we've had some conversations off air, and I was just really blown away by your depth of knowledge. And I can usually tell, being in the space and, talking about these topics on a lot of different podcasts, you have a depth of knowledge because you understand electricity and how deep that rabbit hole goes. A lot of people don't understand really the nature of electricity and what we've learned as a species and like what we continue to learn, and the fact that we don't really have everything dialed in and really figured out. Most people don't understand resistance or capacitance or inductance or any of these kind of like principles. And, a lot of people talk about ways to reduce and, help with this problem we call dirty electricity, which I really want to dive into today with you. Just a little bit about my background, because we didn't really discuss this too much off camera, but my dad was actually an electrical engineer. And I remember growing up, he had a bench down in the garage and in the basement. And I remember just seeing his oscilloscopes, and all this gear and the stuff that he would tinker with. And he was really, he was an electrical engineer by trade, but he was really fascinated with kind of more the occult knowledge, the Nikola Tesla stuff. How do we make free energy? I remember he had these like spinning magnet devices where he's trying to create perpetual motion over unity type devices and stuff like that, which as a kid, that had a huge influence on me as far as like studying these people that have, been essentially written out of history and a lot of their inventions and what they've like kind of discovered over time. So I got into health and wellness and, biology and kind of understanding how the body works, how consciousness works, all this kind of stuff. And it all kind of a few years ago kind of came together because I didn't really get the electrical engineer gene. I got more the musical gene. So I grew up playing music, and I started making these correlations with like, wow, like if I hit my floor tom or I hit my kick drum, that's this kind of longitudinal compression, this pressure wave that actually has these kind of unique effects, and how you can hear it through walls and all these kind of things. Like, how is that actually working? And, sine waves on, audio engineering software. I was just really fascinated with this. And I started making these correlations with the electrical engineering side and kind of remembering like what my dad had taught me about all this kind of stuff. So long story short, like seeing like how we work, mind, body, spirit, emotional, mental levels, it's all connected with electricity. It's all connected with magnetism. It's all connected with vibration and frequency and all this kind of stuff. So I wanted to take this opportunity to talk to you because there's just so many of these kind of influencers that kind of have these half truths and these half understandings, like with building biology and using these capacitance-based, Stetzer-style filters and stuff like that. So I thought you would be a really great person to like kind of dive deep on how all of this works. And I guess I'd like to start with, your background and how one thing I thought was really interesting that we discussed on the phone is that you didn't actually learn about extra hypersensitivity or EHS for a long time you'd been doing testing and all this kind of stuff for a very long time on circuits and whatnot, and you didn't really make that connection till later. So maybe you can go into your background and how you kind of came across the EHS kind of phenomenon that it's more well understood today.
Okay, that's a big topic, but um, hello everybody. I got into this field. I've been testing power for. I was a tradesman. I'm still a tradesman for 45 years. It means I'm getting old, yes. But I got into about I don't know, probably a dozen years or so ago. Like I said, I've been testing power for decades, and it was always line voltage controls, real power, not higher frequency noise that we talk and are concerned about, and dirty power and things like that. So I got a very good understanding of how power works, how it comes from our providers, how it's segregated out into our systems, into our panels and our equipment and then electronics happened, and it's just continually piled upon itself. And I find I still test a lot of sensitive power systems around Canada, and not so much in the States anymore because I haven't really been there since COVID. But um, we I there's a very alarming trend that I'm really concerned about. Um, and it's got to do with, we'll get into the EHS sensitivities and the stuff with the higher frequencies. But what I'm really concerned about is the aspect of power itself. And when you deal with power, you absolutely have to do, you have to clean all the facets, all the modes of power if you're going to make any difference at all, or you're going to add filtration onto higher frequency noise or whatever you have to make sure your power is clean first before you add any filtration for your higher frequencies and things like that. That's an absolute must because one will carry into the other. And so in order to do, excuse me if I jump around because it's a very, very big topic, and I don't expect the average person, individual, to have any kind of knowledge about how electricity works because, man, I've run into hundreds, if not thousands, of electricians that deal with it every day, and they still don't know how it works
Right.
intricately. So I don't expect it's like talking to a doctor and knowing, what he's recommending. So, when you, like I said, in order to clean power, you have to make sure that all your modes are clean. And the alarming trend that I am seeing is that the industry itself, whether it's engineers, electricians, right down to end user groups, they are um, they put they put too much emphasis on one side and not the other.
Right.
So I have over time in history, the neutral wire and the ground system and the bond between the neutral and the ground, and all of this has been downplayed in the electrical industry. And now with the implementation of so much noise, and I'll call it noise, or I'll call it nonlinear loads, which are things like variable speed drives that now we have in our fridges, in the compressors and LED lighting, and this has all affected our power,
Right.
and it's affected its ability to function properly. It's
Yep.
not a I get this because I have $20,000 meters that I utilize to test for power, and I test power old school way. I actually go in and I test the power with very expensive meters, and I'm able to get very, very closely down on the sine wave. When I analyze, make power reports, and I don't know of anybody that does this anywhere else in the world outside of probably our group of companies. But because when companies get in touch with me to come in and test their power, they've got an actual problem. They've got something that they can document that's costing them money.
Right.
So, like I said, we'll get into the EHS stuff after, but
Sure.
power testing is all about being able to identify what's going on, whether it's a power wire, whether you got single phase, two phase, three phase. It's about what's happening at the minute level. And I'm talking like down to 1 or 2 cycles per second. You need to see that sine wave
Right.
to see, the entities that are harming it, whether they're transients or harmonics or dips or swells or sags. You need to see that. And a lot of times you need to bring in the process that I do with the reports, you need to bring that screen up to 2,000 or 4,000 times to be able to see those items. But
Absolutely.
they're affecting everything in our electronics and our processing language, the binary language, it and how it functions. They're affecting that. And without seeing it, you can't diagnose it. And even if the irony of this is, even if you do diagnose it, you have to be prepared if you're a seller or you're a company that deals in power filtration or surge suppression or whatever. You have to have a product that can fix that problem. If you
Absolutely.
don't, it's redundant. And I'm at a very fortunate spot in my life because we have the Sign Tamer product, which is it's a product, it's the number one suppression device in the world because we invented suppression 50 years ago in Florida. It was made for lightning strikes. And that's where it all started. And it was our engineers and our people that put together our special circuitry protection that is light years ahead of all our competitors, whether it's major electrical supply companies, Square D, Emerson, Schneider, all these companies, they all make suppression. But
Right.
it's not it doesn't have our sine wave tracking involved in it. So, we're light years of everybody. And I chuckle because I'm always having to prove ourselves against competitors. And we're not even talking about the EHS market and the
Right.
higher frequency noise market. So it's very important. And so I'm in a unique position because I can test for this, I can see it, and I can fix it.
Right.
Nobody else can say that. So, and the sign tamer was not built for the EHS market. A lot of people figure it was because we're on the marketplace. We
Yeah.
really didn't gain access to this marketplace because we wanted to be. We've always sold suppression, but it's line voltage suppression. Part of our special circuitry has higher frequency filters in it. We have a sine wave tracking circuitry that operates within the sine wave itself, from peak to peak, right down on the frequency wave itself. We are frequency initiated in our protection. Everybody else is voltage and current,
Right.
which is far above and below the peaks of the sine wave.
Right.
So half the time we have diagnosed the problem, whether, it's a transient, very minute that crosses over the zero line that's causing computer boards to malfunction or shut down or blow up or whatever they're doing. We've already dealt with the issue before they even find out it's a problem. So it's a very unique situation, and I spend all my time, testing and doing reports and talking to people and convincing people and businesses. But typically, when we get called in, there's a problem that we can diagnose and we can fix. So
Yep.
I'm guessing, you mentioned this EHS market, or the sensitivity,
Hmm.
probably I'm guessing like about 8 years ago, I got a call from a couple of doctors who I wished I went through thousands of them, and I wished I could remember who they were out of California. And they got a hold of me one day and kind of took me off guard in between meetings and said, you know, we're so and so, and we've come up with a bunch of information about smart meters. And what do you know about smart meters? And I said, well, I they're monitoring power in our house. It's like, so what it's digital, right? And they said, yeah. Well, 2 hours later, they talked to me about the smart meters and what they do. Well, they're carcinogenic, it's killing us and da 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 da. And they were actually very, very astute as to their knowledge and well trained. And I first I didn't believe them. I said, no, I can't. I'm sorry, but I can't believe that our power companies would do this to us.
Yep.
So I went on a rampage for months. I checked power across Canada, into the States, Nevada, all over the place, California. And started talking to some very influential people in the business, and Bill Bathgate and everybody in Michigan, the spearheading guys behind the EHS market. And Josh Del Sol, I did a thing with him and Sayer
Hmm.
G, and
Yep.
they were highly successful in getting the knowledge out. But even that early knowledge is very vague compared to now, you
Right.
know. So literally, and I honestly didn't test the sign tamer. I probably not for 7 months. I got in a bunch of other filters. I started looking at, well, who's building these filters? No, it's not because I didn't trust the sign tamer. I wanted to know more about the industry and what it was doing, and just I was curious, right, in between the power testings, and I got in, a lot of the capacitive filters that they're selling now, and we tested I tested them, my guys tested them, and we really got into it, and at first I thought, geez, they seem to work. So there's a solution out there. And then I realized that there was a big problem with these filters. I'm sure they had good intentions. I'm not talking about financially wise, but I'm sure they all had good intentions of,
Yeah.
making something that was going to be good for the people and make their lives healthier, and you name it. And then I realized that no, that's not the case at all. The good intentions didn't match what the results were finding on our very sophisticated equipment. And so then I got into the other side of it where I thought, I even sent some of those units down to our factory because we used to have a factory testing stuff down in Florida where our stuff is made, and we were very big in IEEE and everything, a lot of different members. And I wanted the filters to be tested because I had an idea. I came up with tests and I had an idea, and I said, I want you to test these filters in the bench and let me know what you're thinking, right? So once they received them, they tested them and they said, wow, they got back to me and said, they're very good filters. They come pretty close to our results. And I said, really? Okay. Well, have you tested the neutral line? And they went, well, no, why would we do that? Because they just didn't get it
Yeah.
about the higher frequency noise. And I said, I want you to test the neutral line and tell me what you find. 10 minutes later, they phoned me back and said, whoa, like there's a lot of activity on the neutral, which isn't
Yeah.
really going to clean anything. I said, okay, that just confirms what I found. So I wanted to make sure that the lab had done it. So then at that point in time is when I tested the sign tamer against the power coming into the home. And then I did multiple tests again across Canada. And then I found out that are special tracking frequent are tracking that of the sine wave itself, the frequency wave. We have those high frequency filters that go from 1 kilohertz right up to 10 megahertz. So we were able to remove all the noise from the smart meters. We were able to remove it right down to allowable limits, which is 500 millivolts from, according to Bill Bathgate, and or half a volt. And a lot of people's homes were getting upwards of, I never tested anything that was under, say, like 2.5, 3 volts peak to peak on an oscilloscope. And there's only two ways of testing this power, what comes in from the smart meter, because it is, you can't use handhelds. I've been saying this for years. People walking around with their magnetic level, their handhelds. I don't care. They're all good products, but they're not specifically designed for the power. You can't, all they're doing is they're reading magnetism and electric fields and whatever, and they
Right.
say, well, it's stronger over here in this room than it is over there. And that could be wiring problems, could be crossed over bonds with neutrals, could be all kinds of things that are causing that. So that was the real issue at the time. So then the building biology group got involved and they changed all the terms, and they went from dirty electricity, what we used to call dirty electricity. I used to see this noise on the scope all the time. It was always there, but it was minute. It was at the bottom of the sine wave.
Right.
We didn't care. As power testers, we didn't care at all. I mean, nobody had any problems with the US military, NASA. Nobody ever had any problems with the high frequency noise. They still don't, as a matter of fact.
Exactly. Yep.
EHS, electrohypersensitivity, has gained its notoriety from the whole market and the industry, and they've grouped everything into one now. And that's not right either, because power and power problems are not that. They're not part of the EHS market, things like that. That can be changed in a heartbeat. So I don't know, it's one of those systems that, has happened over time. And I'm gonna give you some information here today that I haven't talked about before, but I just thought, we were doing this interview and I had a couple days to prep for it. And I thought, there's some things that need to be said here that will become mainstream now. And I can talk not only from a tester capability, from somebody that sees power issues in the finest sense of the word, right down to the capabilities of fixing these issues. And because the sine tamer is so effective at cleaning power, that it gives me a gratitude that I can not only test and help, or to implement it, but to help. And so, you know, our electronics, and I firmly believe that since COVID, and I talk about COVID and I use it as a sort of a form, sort of a line, because prior to COVID, there was all kinds of, industry went on, everybody's lives went on. And, there was, everybody always has projects, whether it's airports, every business has projects, or they want to implement over a period of months, say installs. LED lighting is a prime example, because LED lighting prior to COVID was probably around 75% that we were still able to go out and buy incandescent bulbs and fluorescents
Yep.
and you name it, right? Well, since COVID, when COVID shut the world down, it enabled the companies to fulfill all their plans and projects on the books. And a lot of that was implementation of LED lighting, runways, airports, you name it. Every industry was affected. Well,
And
when COVID,
LEDs are super harmful for people's health, and we can
oh,
dive into that as
yeah,
well. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
So
Please continue.
when, yeah, when COVID quit, now we're at like 98% LED lighting, and you can't buy bulbs anymore, and you
Right.
can't do this and you can't do that. Same as solar. Look what solar did, and look what solar inverters do. If
Yeah.
people were EHS, or they were sensitive to electronics and electronic noise, they would never buy a solar package.
Right.
They wouldn't put that in their house. So, you know, the world has progressed to such a point, and I was doing some testing recently where this all came to roost for me. And I believe my personal, uh, I don't know, my personal thought on the world and microprocessors and computers and LEDs and everything that's tied in, we have passed the tipping point of being able to be self-sufficient on our power.
Yep.
We, without help, we can no longer afford the luxury of being healthy, being able to depend. I talk about dependability all the time on our electronics, our microprocessors, our fundamental equipment that we use and many businesses use, like variable speed drives and lighting. I work with a lot of dairies, so I get to see a lot of the conditions. And we can no longer depend on anything we have that's electronic or electric. And
Wow.
every personal thing we have in our world has got a circuit board in it.
It's true.
So that means it's giving off higher frequency noise. And because it's efficient, we're so efficient now, but nobody ever gave any thought to what this is going to cause. And it's come back to roost now.
Yeah.
And nothing wants to function properly or for any length of time. There's a reason. It's transients.
Well,
And
yeah.
yeah,
And that's so
one last
go
statement I
ahead.
want to make. The transients cause functionality and long-term conditions. Harmonics do not, for the most part. LED, capacitive lighting, all that stuff causes harmonics on our neutral line, which corrupts our neutral line and causes higher magnetic fields. That's where your capacitive filters come in, because they convert the energy that they don't want, push it through a capacitor, create
Right.
capacitance, which causes harmonics on our neutral line. So people feel that.
Right.
And
100%.
so that's the big problem
Well, that's,
today.
man, there's just so much to unpack with all this. Like, I want to
Yeah.
get into like conducted emissions, like let through voltage, DM,
Yeah.
MEP. Like, I want to, like, so like having this higher level conversation or this deep dive, if you will, like, we want to kind of bridge the gap between like surface level information that people are seeing online and giving people kind of a rooted idea or understanding of electricity. You're talking about electronic equipment failing, like your first point, like not even about EHS. I've one thing I had on installed on my house, for example, was an EMP shield. And I'm definitely
Mhm.
curious about like sine tamer compare and the suppression technology that is really looking at the full 360-degree aspect of the sine wave and monitoring that. But I do want to kind of talk about those and like people with this neutral line and ground and understanding kill switches. That's another popular kind of thing where people switch off a breaker at night and they don't really understand like it really doesn't matter on certain levels. So we can go into that. But as far as protecting electronics from lightning strikes and any of this kind of stuff, how would you compare a sine tamer to something like there's a local company out here in Topeka, Kansas that's EMP Shield. That was the first thing I put on my house. And I was studying, the green wave type, like capacitance-based filtration, because like everybody talks about it. It's kind of been trendy over the last, 6, 7 years. And one thing for me is that because it's, regulated by voltage, not frequency, I couldn't use it on my house because I have a backup generator. And that's what got me thinking. I was like, okay, wait. so I contacted Greenway, for example, and they have great customer service, great people. Like, I think you're 100% right on. I think they're well intended with what they're doing. But I was like, okay, well, why can't I use this? Why would this back feed into my generator? Like, what's really going on? And then I started getting to deeper levels. And that's actually how I found your company researching this. And when I put in the sign tamer, I noticed a really good effect. Now I play with all kinds of gadgets, like that's like I'm in the EMF space, so I get to like R&D test stuff and just see kind of get a feel on what works and what doesn't.
Sure.
And I was just curious, first and foremost, when we were talking about suppression, what differentiates Sign Tamer on the computer electronics protection level versus something like an EMP shield that's kind of like just grounding out, excess voltage at like, 500ths of a second or whatever.
Yeah, because it's basically a pulse. That's what they worried about, from the universe, giving them a pulse. That's where they come in, right? Which is basically a sudden surge or a transient. So, we the sign tamer with its special circuitry is able to function in all areas. Like literally, we are the let through voltage that the sign tamer has is 1.7% of the applied surge transient. And because it is a functionality issue with transients, and nobody understands transients,
Can you define that
engineers,
for us, by the way, just for people that have no real background in
yeah,
electrical? What's
a,
a transient exactly?
a transient is a millisecond, microsecond spike. That's why you have to delve so deep into the sine wave to see it. I mean, not always. Some can be thousands of volts, right? But the
Mhm.
majority of them are 15, 50, 60, 100 volts on a sine wave. And it happens so fast in the milli or microsecond range that you don't see it. You don't see it with meters. You don't see it with anything. And when you do it, it happens so fast that breakers don't pick it up. Like
Right.
you can't rely. I've had lots of people say, well, breakers will pick it up. No, the traditional swell that the breakers will pick up is 2 to 3 seconds, not milliseconds.
Right.
So they just won't pick these transient spikes up, and they're the cancer of our electrical systems. The transients are.
Right.
So no, everybody ignores them, and mostly the engineers ignore them. The reason why? Because they don't think there's anything out there that can kill them, that can beat them up.
Right.
So they look at harmonics and they look at other long-term entities that transpire on the sine wave, and they say, well, it's got to be harmonics or it has to be this. No, they're not functionality problems.
Right.
They don't create functionality. They create heat for the most part. Harmonics do on the windings, on contact points, on the wiring itself.
Right.
So there's that confusion. So if they don't think there's anything out there that can fix the problem, they don't think about it.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
so that's where I come in. And you're talking about switches. Well, what most people don't realize, and people came to me and said, well, I'm going to install an isolation switch in my bedroom and I'm going to turn the power off in my room and I'm going to sleep good. I said, well, unless you put an isolation switch in that can isolate both your power lines or one power line and your neutral and your ground, there's no point in doing it because your neutral and ground are always live by code. They have to be. They have to get rid of stray current, excess current. That's why they're bonded in
Right.
case you have a catastrophic zap or a lightning strike. There's a quick way of it going to ground through the panel into the ground rod. So our electrical safety code is there for safety, not for conditions like what we're talking about.
Not for
It's just a
biology. Yeah.
fair standard. I tell electricians all the time, we need to wire in excess of the code, to be safe for EHS people. But then again, who heard of EHS before 7 or 8 years ago?
I know. It's just this new phenomenon. It's like people are getting this. I liken it to like an allergy. It's like the body can adapt and respond because it's just brilliant at that. There's this endogenous intelligence at the cell level and cell communication. And these, you know, yeah, we could go into the biology and how
Well,
cells communicate and
Wi-Fi,
signals they send and being more
neutral.
self-referential versus
Sure.
having like dirty signals within endogenously in the body.
Sure.
But
Wi-Fi, 5G,
I
it's
know.
all confuses the issue,
So
right?
we have to have strategy for that. For the dirty electricity conversation that we're having with the wiring, that's its own thing. But then we have, yeah, cell towers, people's Wi-Fi routers. If you have neighbors, there's all these aspects to address. And what kind of blew my mind that I don't really hear anybody talking about it except for you and people that are super knowledgeable in this is that, when people are using capacitance-based filtration, of course, they're using these little EMI. They'll plug in a filter and then they'll plug this in. Like, look, there's this obvious effect, and they're not really, like you're saying, they're not getting the full spectrum. They're not using an oscilloscope with high pass filters that actually can like really read the sine wave. And then the neutral line, they're actually like the magnetic field that's being generated in offshoot. That's insane to me because they're like thinking they're doing this awesome thing for EHS, but based on everything you've taught me, it's almost like it makes it worse. Like you'd be
It
better off
does.
just not doing it, and it's more costly. I mean, maybe you can break down like what these things are actually doing, how they're using energy, and like what's happening on the neutral line. I think people would be really interested in that.
Well, because 98% of the time when you look at these filters, they don't have, they don't have a power, a neutral, and a ground connection on them. They may have a plug-in that you can plug in that says, well, there's three there, but they're either not connected or they're not wired through to the ground or, whatever. They use the neutral. And they're a plug-in device. So because they're a plug-in device, they're not regulated by the laws, electrical laws. They can Anybody can make one up and sell it. Now, I'm not saying anything bad about these companies and how they build their products. They're there to
Sure,
make money in
absolutely.
whatever they do, and that all the power to them. But they're also not regulated as per, like they're not regulated per what a suppression unit has to be able to do.
Right.
And even that regulation is vague because most of the time our people were involved in writing the original laws. So, there's a lot of snake salesmen out there over the last 7 or 8 years, and it just drives me crazy because I hear of, like I said, my business is based on commercial and industrial companies and power testing and helping them with their equipment. And when all this thing with EHS came down for sensitive people that were sick, I believed them. I thought, wow, I have spent thousands of hours on the phone and emails. And I don't push my product. I give them information, because they're hurting. They can't figure things out. And it doesn't, I just feel for them. I understand that they're going through a lot of pain and
Yeah.
nobody understands it. Doctors don't, they're starting to. Um, so, but this is a man-made sickness.
Yeah.
And, it just didn't come out of the clouds like, other things and other diseases did. So it's a problem. And okay, the capacitive devices, what you asked for. It's easy for them, like they basically are able to isolate the unwanted energy, a level of higher frequency, maybe in the supra range of harmonics from 3 or 4 kilohertz up to like 9 kilohertz, somewhere in that range.
Hmm.
And they will capture that, and at some point in time where their filtration is, and they'll grab it and they'll push it through a capacitor, a small capacitor, and shunt it straight to the neutral line. Have that capacitor shunt into the neutral line. So as a capacitor does that, it literally creates capacitance, and when it dumps it onto the neutral line, it is a form of a harmonic. So it will increase the magnetic fields compared to if it wasn't plugged in.
Right.
So you're probably not gonna feel a difference. I mean, the human mind can work pretty weird things, but uh, when I test with oscilloscopes and stuff, I can see the difference. There's, very little on the sine wave of what it does, but it may help people. I mean, all the power to them if it helps people. But it will then create the harmonic and create an induced harmonic field, which is higher magnetic fields that people will pick up with their handheld meters. And haven't you ever noticed that these companies that sell those have their own meters that they will sell to you for you to check
Yeah.
their
And then,
sensor?
yeah, and then building biologists and all these types are just kind of using that as kind of a standard, like read the meter, here's the
Yeah,
science, but they don't really understand the
yeah,
full breadth of
yeah.
knowledge on that. And then they don't realize that there's more power draw when you're using capacitance. So,
Yeah, you pay for it.
yeah,
You pay for every little bit of power, every one of the filters. And don't get me wrong, again, like I said before, I'm not, blaming these power filter companies because I firmly do believe that they meant to do good, you know.
100%. Yeah.
But everything has drastically changed on our power systems that, the effectiveness of them is dropping every day the more we change.
Yeah. Because a lot
So,
of people don't realize that everything you have plugged into the mains that's running on the house circuit, and everything's causing these transients.
yes.
Your blender, your TV, your refrigerator, your smart meter. I mean, smart meters are incredible, even more so because it's reading and getting this feedback from every single device that's using power on your circuit. So
So
there's a lot going on.
we should really talk about the smart meter because the people need to know how the smart meter works. Now, everything electronic that we have in our lives, TVs, chargers, everything, even down to hair dryers, and is electronic now.
Yep.
They all have a tiny little circuit board in there. If you'll notice your TV or the larger electronic items, you'll notice that the power cords have a black choke on them. Now, it's probably 3/4 of an inch long by half inch round. It just clamps onto the power line.
Mhm.
Well, that's a choke. It's called a choke. And it removes the higher frequency from traveling down that line. So, because all our electronics function off DC power to run, to run, it's not AC power. They use a switch mode power supply to convert 120 down to whatever DC voltage they want, but it's DC. So, because they have to use a switch mode power supply, it's the switch mode power supply that induces the kilohertz frequency through its action at converting the voltages.
Mhm.
So that's what we get on our power lines going around on all our wiring because the smart meter is all digital. It uses the kilohertz frequency in our homes to travel around the wiring for them to be able to read the data. And that's how they can tell everything that you use, when it shuts off, when it turns on, because everything we have is electronic. So that's why they're able to tell you, well, you just started a light and you just started your TV and, things like that.
And then it's
Well,
transmitting out to be received by
yes,
a truck
it's
driving by.
on,
Yeah.
it's on your line of power.
Right.
And so they're able to, our old analog meters used to read, voltage and current, the amount of current you used. And then it would do their rough calculation. They'd work out kilowatt hours and they'd make your bill out. Well, the new smart meters and digital meters and anything digital doesn't have to be a smart meter. It's still going to read the same thing. And people ask me that all the time. I say, well, as long as it's digital, I say, you may not have a smart meter and you may be in a neighborhood of 20 with the transformer. As long as you're on that same transformer, you're going to get all the garbage from everybody else's house.
Right.
So so they're able to take that information and they're able to convert it to a bill. That's why they get to sense what that transient spike is, the very top of it. And they don't care. They sense that. They know what it is because of the kilohertz frequency and they're able to convert that to a bill that maybe it's 20, 30, 40% higher. They don't care. They just say, well, you're now utilizing power more that you didn't use before, and we're being more efficient. So your bill went up by 40%. Well, that's the problem. But the problem is that they gain the power factor is what they use both in the world to gauge how efficient your power is in a home or a building.
Hmm.
That's why that's how they take that information and they make it into a power factor. And that's how they gauge how they bill you, how much they bill you. So, if you got a high power factor, and in a house it was never thought of before, but now with the smart meters, they don't have to talk about it anymore. They just get to bill you for all that information that you don't really use,
Right.
and your bills all go up. Well, the sign tamer is able to read that data and remove it because it takes it down to a very low level, takes it down basically to what your old analog meter was. And I don't tell people that we save them money on power. I don't want to get in that game
Don't want to
because
do
there's
that, right?
too many people that say, well, you promised me this and you promised me that. I said, I don't want to know that. It's a byproduct of what we do.
Well, it's
And
funny too because like a lot of people at my old residence, I actually opted out of the smart meter. But what I didn't realize when I was doing that, like they make you pay more per month because they have to have somebody
yeah,
physically come out to your house and measure the voltage and like just measure all the metrics.
I
And
did.
yeah, so
I was
and
in my old house and I had a analog meter and I kept paying like $30 a month for it for 6 months till I figured out, hey buddy, you got a sign timer. Why don't you put one on the wall?
yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing. It's like you're paying extra to have it, but then it's still digital. It's they don't install an old school analog. That's what people don't really realize about like opting out of the smart meter game. It's like you're still dealing with a lot of the same problems with the digital. You're just not transmitting the RF. And
Yeah.
I don't even know
Well,
if
there
they're
you
taking the
are.
circuit. Yeah, I
Well,
mean,
yeah, they are because they're digital.
so they
But
so,
And, and they take that, and then they came out with a smart meter when they said, "Well, we got a new version of it. It's like an analog meter. It even had the dials on it, and it spun around, but you looked in the back, and it was all electronic.
that's the thing.
So,
They literally tell you that it's not anymore.
yeah,
Meanwhile, they're just charging you extra because they have to have somebody come out and manually read it,
yeah,
which they don't
yeah.
actually need to, from what I understand. It's crazy.
No, no. It's a game that the hydro companies play, and they will get into long arguments with you about things. But I've gotten into a few steamy conversations with guys that were working for the power companies and electricians and linemen and stuff. And they're all good guys. They just don't know they're taught that this is what has to be in this. But this whole system now ties into what's going on in the world. It was the first. There was a reason
Yep.
why, when the smart meters were being implemented, and I'm going back, what, 7 or 8 years ago, nobody realizes that there was white vans going around to every school and at night implementing the 5G, putting their towers up, putting you know sensors inside the building and everything because it's all about that you know and I knew about it at the time and I just kept shaking my head thinking, wow, where is this going you
Well,
know
and it's funny because we were reporting on it back in the 2020 era where, a lot of this was happening when people were locked in their houses. Like people
yeah,
weren't seeing the level that this was
yeah,
going on.
no. No, it was scary to me, still is. But I've been able to see because of I'm out and about and all the power and talking to people around the world, and I'm able to see how it's all kind of come across in a big circle. And but the smart meters were the first to go in, and but that's a problem for us in our health. Like I said, power people aren't concerned with EHS or higher magnetic fields or electronics, but they are now because our functioning of our everything that we have has gone downhill and eroded so bad now in the
Yeah.
last couple of years that you're you know I feel sorry for everybody. I really do. You
It's
know.
it's actually terrible and egregious in a lot of ways. And even with these power companies are incentivizing people to put smart thermostats in their house and all this kinds of that's just a really more or less a complex computer that's
Hmm.
regulating everything. So imagine having all of these, computers
Fields.
everywhere in your house that is just really kind of doing not the same thing as these smart meters, but I mean pretty darn close as far as its capabilities.
Well, what I didn't talk about smart meters is I didn't talk about the effects of it. So when it comes into the house, and I've tested for this 1,000 times. When it comes into the house on the power line after the switch mode power supply, it travels around all your circuits on the line of power that it enters in on. And so it rides on top of the power line. It's a kilohertz frequency, and it rides on top of the line, and it goes through all the wiring in your home, wherever those circuits are that it's fed in from. And it radiates out from the wall laterally for 5 to 7 feet. So we're talking about a kilohertz frequency here that is carcinogenic. And the US government made a report about that thick in the Second World War because the Russians shone, they were the ones that induced it. They shone 100 kilohertz ring wave into the US embassy, and after 6 months, everybody 80% had contracted cancer. So they knew what they had then in the Second World War. So, it travels around your home and it radiates out from the wall for 5 to 7 feet at whatever level that can only be tested with a scope or a spectrum analyzer. And where do you sleep with your head? A foot away from the wall for 8 hours a night.
It's
And you're
unbelievable. And that's the field effect we were talking about in the room. And
yeah.
so with using with just the nature of the electrical fields and them, would you say it's more like the magnetic effect that's happening? Because when you're talking about compounding the magnetic onto the neutral line, is that being exacerbated in the room as far as the field effect, or are you just talking specifically smart meter effects?
Well, you can't shut that neutral or the ground off. By code, you can't. So it's traveling around the neutral wire all the time. And it's what's creating the higher magnetic fields. It's what you're getting into your head. It's what's getting into your body, your kids. You have to be concerned about that. I've over the years, I've had a couple of doctors say to me that I know very well that have said, 5G and Wi-Fi and all this stuff that's bombarding our airwaves now. They've come right out and said everyone should be less concerned with that Wi-Fi, 5G, and all this stuff that's out in the air than they should be what's on their power lines because that's carcinogenic. And
100%.
they should be aware of that way before they worry about cellular and 5G and everything else.
Well, 5G, like people think, I mean, they don't understand it's generations, and all those generations are kind of built like the internet. It's built and
Mm.
stacked on each other, and millimeter waves don't penetrate things very well. They're probably going to convince people to put 5G repeaters in their house for better signal strength and all this kind of stuff. And
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, the electrical wiring a house has profound implications, and it's like electromagnetic cage. I mean, if you take all the walls away and you actually
Yeah.
just look at wiring only, it's amazing that, you know, yeah, it's on so many levels. It's super crazy, and like you're saying, it's carcinogenic. Even though these new millimeter waves that they're using in 5G, of course, it's going to affect the voltage gated calcium channels and some of these more sensitive aspects of our body, which has these downstream cascade effects that throughout physiology, which is well documented. I mean, that's nothing new. We're
Yeah.
kind of preaching to the choir on that one. But
Yeah.
so with the sign tamer technology, what's its direct relationship with how smart meters function, and what's it really kind of doing? um, we've talked about the capacitance base. We know stuff's happened on the neutral line. So are you just cleaning up the signal enough to where what anything on the neutral line is just not going to be as substantial as far as its biological effects?
Yeah, our philosophy with suppression and cleaning power is that there's no point in cleaning, there's no point in building a filter or a power filter device or a suppression unit if you're not cleaning all modes of the power. In order to be effective, you have to clean one or two or three legs of power, single phase, three phase,
Mhm.
plus your neutral, plus your ground. So all the wires and all the modes must be cleaned with the same circuitry.
So you're actually cleaning the line to line, the line to neutral, line
Yes.
to ground, all of it.
Yes.
Yep.
line to line, line to neutral, line to ground, neutral to ground.
Yep.
So that's very important. And without that, you stand no chance of cleaning power effectively. And and when you clean power, you can't even begin to talk about cleaning higher frequency noise off power without cleaning the power first. It's impossible. You have to clean the power first long before you try to attempt to clean the higher frequency noise because one's dependent on the other. So, that's another fallacy that I've been, I hold back a lot of times because I get into these conversations with people in groups and video chats and that's something that people don't understand because they don't understand power. And that's a
Yeah.
big.
Yeah, understanding power I think is fundamental, and understanding, human biology and how it interfaces with that power is big too. Because one thing I'd like to get your perspective on, because you mentioned like transformers and like how everybody in a neighborhood is essentially like is connected via that
Mhm.
electricity, and our body kind of acts as a nonlinear capacitor in a sense, and we're designed to kind of go out. All of our cells and our tissue are transceivers, and we're designed to kind of take signals from the environment, whether that's light from the sun or the magnetism that's generated by the earth. We're designed to go outside, ground, and thrive in nature, essentially.
Sure.
So my question is, I've always warned against, this idea of like taking these huge silver woven conductive sheets and putting them on your bed and plugging it into the ground. Cause to me, you could see the voltmeter go and like drop, and people are like, oh, that's really great. You're grounding. But your body being a nonlinear capacitor, you're essentially running all of the transients through the system, and maybe at lightning speed and it's hitting ground. But that
Mm.
seems like it could have a negative impact on the body, if unless you're like going directly out into the ground. I mean, and then you could talk about stray voltage. But then also, if you're not cleaning your power sufficiently, I mean, that much surface area that acts as an aerial, and it's kind of concentrating it around your body while you're sleeping, versus using like kind of like sticky pad conductive things, and you're putting it on your body and then grounding it out. So what's your take on, plugging yourself into the ground of the house, and like basically making your body more in phase with the circuitry?
There's nothing wrong with grounding, providing the grounding is done properly in your house.
Cool. So even if somebody
In
doesn't clean up their electricity and they're grounding and getting this effect.
Well, that, I mean, I have seen far too many instances of bonding and neutrals and grounds, and our neutral wire is so corrupt now because of everything that we've done and accumulated and put, on our systems, on our electrical systems, what we use to be, considered efficient. Uh, but uh, probably 80% of the time, I see problems. I get people to take panel covers off and show me their wiring and their panel. They complain about this, complain about that. Where, it seems commonplace, especially not so much in Canada, but especially in the States. Um, they have all their grounds and neutrals run to the same bar and, to the same terminal strip, and which causes all kinds of stray current and, crossovers between grounds and neutrals, and people are feeling that. So the first thing I say is, well, you get an electrician in and get them segregated, in
Right.
which they have to be. There's a big difference between a ground and a neutral wire. And so they really don't get it. Well, the electricians say, well, it's the code. Say, no, it's not the code. Code says you make a bond between the ground and the neutral in the main panel, not on the sub panels, in the
Right.
main panel. You make a bond for in case you have a catastrophic hit of lightning or whatever that's got a nice clean path to go to the ground rod. Not because they're trying to be good guys and make everything the same wire, your neutral and your ground. That's not why they do it. So if people want to ground on a mat, and I don't want to dissuade people from doing things or doing what they want to do, but please
Mhm.
make sure that your ground and your neutral is run properly in your home. make sure that that is done to code. Do you go to a ground rod outside, not to grounding inside of concrete slabs, and where the slab is always live with stray current,
Yeah.
and they feel like hell when they walk in the room. Please make sure that your circuits are run properly. And if you have an electrician that looks at you like you're from another planet, then you want to probably hire another electrician,
Right.
because there are guys out there that are aware of this stuff and they do it accordingly. I have some excellent ones I use up here in Canada, but and that's my big thing that I tell people is, God, you're talking about your health and your kids' health and your grandkids. You gotta protect yourself.
100%. So really it's more about proper wiring than any risk of, if you're not cleaning up your electricity with a sine tamer, there's no risk of that like kind of running on the line and creating incoherent noise in the body when you're actually grounded to the circuit then.
Yeah, because people don't understand. Like, if everybody is, like I mentioned earlier, if everybody is on a common grid, which is normal in the city, they'll put 8 or 10 or 20 houses on a transformer bank that'll
Mhm.
feed every house.
Mhm.
Well, that's a common bank. And so whether you install stuff in your house, or you're still going to get, even if you don't have a smart meter, like I said, you had an analog meter, and all your neighbors have got a smart meter, they don't know you're getting all their stuff in your house,
Right.
because the ground and neutral are always common. They're always out there. So even if you're on an acreage and you've got your own transformer, and sure, that's good for your power, but your neutral always goes back to the transformer.
True.
So, that's live, and people don't get that. They don't understand that. And when it comes to generators and things like that, where people wire them into their houses, that's great. They've got backup in case power goes down. I don't know what the grid is like, but it causes huge transients every time the switch gear switches over. Massive transients come in that'll wipe out all your electronics, your fridge. It's like getting a lightning strike sometimes when they kick
Wow.
off.
Wow.
So, it can be hundreds or thousands of volts or amps. So, that's why it's so important to protect at your main panel, because anything that's induced from inside the house is going to travel back to the main panel and it gets cleaned up. Anything that comes in from the grid, from your smart meter or other things, it gets taken out at the panel. So it's so important. People need to really, when they get sick from EHS, and maybe they just buy a house and they move in, and God, it's like a couple of weeks and they can't sleep. They can't, they're sick. They don't know why. It's time to start looking at your power.
Yeah, and I think it's an essential piece of gear. I work with technologies that work on the biology to strengthen, the natural biology because of all the stuff you can't control that's, aerial, like we're talking about, cell towers and satellites
Mhm.
and this and that. So I want to talk a little bit about the actual technology itself. In particular, when you're talking about lightning strikes and surges and stuff, if let's say your house got hit by lightning and your sign tamer protects from the oversurge on that, is it destroy the sign tamer? Or is it built to withstand these kind of like
Well,
really high surges?
it's got a 25-year warranty on it, unequivocal. Like you know, many, many times. I mean, it's meant for numerous, because the sign tamer is different than everybody else. Not only is circuitry, but it has multi levels of protection and multiple. So there's many banks of the protection built in per mode. So, I mean, it happens. We've had some electronics. I've had some units fail, not many. I've heard of a few in lightning areas when you get a big electrical storm, but rarely does it happen. And if it fails, it gets replaced. I mean, but it usually doesn't carry into the house. The unit sacrifices itself.
Right.
So
Well, that's what I was wondering if it would actually be sacrifice that you have to replace if a lightning, or if it could withstand multiple, you know,
yeah,
high
it's meant to
surges.
withstand loss, you know,
That's
but
awesome.
yeah, it's not, such a unique product. And I don't want to sound like I'm on here to, promote Sign Tamer and all that. I'm not. I'm not that type of person. I just want people to understand more about what they're dealing with in their homes and their lives, and understand more of what can be done. And
100%. And I think people should know about Cytamer, to be honest. Like I'm not an influencer type. I consider myself somebody who does education, and I'm an entrepreneur.
mhm,
And I think that, I look for things for myself and my family, and those are the things that like I like to integrate, like my website, where we do Japanese herbs and especially things. These are all
mhm,
lifestyle, and a lot of people, they get the exercise and the water and the diet down and meditation and like stress mitigation techniques, but they don't really look at the electromagnetic pollution, and they don't look at, this is a modern lifestyle. I'm using computers to communicate with you right now. Like, you're right. It's becoming increasingly crazy, if you want to put it that way, when it comes
yeah.
to, power and electronics. And, these do have biological effects, and people do need to know about them. So, I do appreciate that you're out there with something that actually works when, a lot of what's promoted online, people just don't, they have this, like I said at the beginning, this surface level understanding. And these like influencers will just kind of like parrot what everybody else is saying. Nobody really goes deep. And I do appreciate your time going deep into this, because even on your website, like you've said stuff in this interview today that, you can't readily access online, which I
So
appreciate, because people don't really get the full breadth of what's going on with this dirty electricity phenomenon, and just also just protecting, just a very practical, like protecting your equipment. That's, it's fundamental in this day and age of how we like earn a
yeah.
living, or we communicate with each other, or we go online and learn. We're all connected to this, electrical grid. So it's important.
Well, I had Bill Bathgate doesn't do anymore, but for a couple of years he used to run a forum with building biologists every Tuesday at 10 in the morning from all over the US. People would come on. It was a Zoom call, and I was on there all the time. And I don't know how many times with building biologists, we finally got them convinced, the serious ones, to buy an oscilloscope. If they're going to check, you better check the right way.
A lot of them
Don't
don't. I mean, a
Yeah,
lot
don't
of them
come at
don't.
me with all kinds of data from your handheld meter. I don't want to hear it. I don't want to know it, because if you can't get a scope, sorry, but I don't want to talk to you. So, because you don't have the knowledge that it takes for me to make an accurate assessment. But I, you don't know how many times I had to say to people, look, at the sign tamer was not designed for the EHS market. We've been around for 50 years helping industry, NASA, big people, US military, state departments. You won't find a consulate in the world that doesn't have our technology on the wall. So, we weren't made for this EHS market. Don't confuse us with the capacitive filters you can buy, because I said our protection on the higher frequency noise that you're worried about for health reasons is a byproduct of our circuitry.
Exactly.
We didn't make the unit. We didn't make the unit for that. We made it to protect electric systems.
Right.
So,
Which, yeah, that's a nice byproduct to have, that it actually makes things more coherent, less noisy,
yeah,
and more biologically safe, which is
yeah,
huge.
yeah. And I just feel for people so much because they're lost. They don't, there was a time, at least now you can talk to people like yourself and get in touch, and you can say, wow, I got some real bad health problems, and I don't know what's wrong and I need help. Well, at least now people like yourself will listen, and they know they got the capabilities and the knowledge. They accept that. But man, you go back 5, 6, 7 years when this started,
Yeah.
people did not know. They had no idea why they were doing this, you know, what was happening to them. So, it's something that I'm proud of in a lot of ways because I'm able to help a lot of people. And, you know, It's not easily done, but you got to educate everybody too. That takes time, so.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I appreciate this. And, we are definitely going to make it more readily available to our audience and everything. And, man, there's just so much we could even go, like your understanding of electricity and energy in that regard is just so profound. And, again, a lot of people don't, what blows my mind as far as being somebody who's genuinely interested in nature, how nature works, how our consciousness works, how our body works, it's pretty shocking when you realize even a lot of like advanced electrical engineers and these building biologist types, they don't really have a really comprehensive understanding. And furthermore, science at large, like a lot of people still think that everything's figured out. Like a lot of people think, well, electricity is moving through copper, around copper, between, copper. They don't really understand the nature of electricity and humans in general. Like you can't
Yeah.
define field. You can't define some of these things and like quantify it. We just have these kind of ideas and we're trying to put a map around the territory, but it's not the territory itself. And electricity is one of these things where I think if you're trying to be a self-reliant individual that's trying to stay healthy, develop your conscious awareness, it's
Mhm.
good to learn, how things work in nature. And everything's one thing that I've been talking about for years because my background in herbalism and studying, being a student of traditional Chinese medicine from a Japanese lineage, we understand the body is physiochemical. We take herbs and substances that send signals in the body that, have these like, biological effects, but we're also electrochemical. These
Yeah.
minute amounts of magnetism, minute amounts of voltage have profound downstream effects in the body. And it's good to learn how electricity fundamentally works, even though humans, I think, at large are still trying to figure it out. That's why I appreciate people like you that understand how deep the rabbit hole goes. And like, you know what you
Well,
know, but we
why?
also know how much we don't know.
Look at 8, 9 years ago. Would you ever expected this to go where it went?
Not at all.
Like I I'm dumbfounded every day. Honestly, I am. I have that ability in my knowledge and to be able to put the twos and the fours together and to figure things out and to do the testing and to go beyond what I think is the norm and what isn't the norm. And I'm people are getting smarter, definitely. I hope so. That can be argued, but I think people are starting to see that there's other things out there. And amazing, the feedback and where the fight was, say 8 years ago with the smart meters. Look, when it came online and everybody was on it and they were hard on it and they were starting to find out what it did and why it's harmful to us, but then it all went away. They forgot about it because there was something else took its place. But it's still here. And I think that it's awful that our power companies are doing this to us. I believe that, and it's all about once again money. So I think that we just need to be aware of these things that are going on, and whether or not you decide to fix it, or you think it's hogwash, or you just don't care. That's fine. It's your opinion.
True.
But the people that really do care and they want to be safe, they will care and they will search it out and they will find it. And that's important.
Well,
I'm just here for some questions.
yeah, and I appreciate you, Terry, because this information is, I think, vital for moving forward in this technological age that we're in until we can figure out how to deal with LEDs, transits, all of the above. I mean,
Well,
there's more problems than solutions.
LEDs do not save you money. That's the constant that everybody looks at and say, well, it's LEDs save me money. No, it's not. Sure, maybe it's saving you on the power used. Seems like it's less. But the problem is that the LEDs, um, light emitting diodes, create a lot of dirty electricity. They throw a lot of harmonics onto the neutral line. So what do they do to monitor and make your bill up? They read the neutral line and
Hmm.
your power lines. So your bill is not as low as it should be. They make up for it on the other side and they raise the rates. So, and LEDs have a very low tolerance to voltage application. They, the average circuit board, the average item that you have in your house, your TVs, your appliances, people are spending tens of thousands of dollars on their appliances now. Like the fridge has got a variable speed drive compressor in it. That's the norm. So the LED bulb, the average LED circuit, is only allowed to have a 1 to 3% voltage variation before it screws up the internal circuitry that will make the bulb go dead. So I know this because I've tested for it and I've been involved with the manufacturers in Asia and other places. And I've been involved with the BC ferries up here and lots of airports and runway lighting that all got converted to LED during COVID and fixed a lot of problems. But it's a very low tolerance. So when you start adding transients in the mix of the voltage because of starting and stopping and that causes the transients, now you're going beyond the 1 to 3%. So, it's it's
Yeah.
a problem that is just getting bigger and
Like
bigger and
my mind goes to like, what's the root of it? Is it just because people are like, you
efficiency.
talk about efficiency, yeah, but I mean, is it just because you don't want to change a light bulb more often? Like, what's actually like the root cause of like causing all this for efficiency? Because there's known effects. Like,
Yeah.
it doesn't make
Yeah.
any sense why, you can't have the option to do incandescent versus LED, for example. And
Yeah, that was a bad one because I love incandescent. Anytime I go somewhere and I find some incandescent bulbs on the shelf, I buy them, boxes of them. But
yeah.
I don't go through bulbs, but I like to have them because I like to use them,
Mhm.
softer lighting and so, the technology that we all know and love and how everything has changed. I mean, in my lifetime, I've seen so much different already, but it all makes our lives supposedly more efficient, but there's a cost to that efficiency. And interestingly enough, every time I go to give a speech somewhere, I talk to a group of people. I said, if you were sick, you had a disease or a problem, you were maybe on your deathbed, maybe you weren't. If you had a choice that you could take that cell phone out that was maybe causing your problems and you could leave it at home or, you know, get rid of it and just get a regular analog phone or something, if you had a choice to get better and do that, would you do it? I haven't had one person in 5 years say, well, no, because they run their business off it or they run this or that, and I couldn't live without the phone. I said, well, that says a lot about our people.
Predicament, yeah.
Yeah. So it's
Well, I actually tried to find a landline. I can't find any providers in my area that even do landlines anymore.
no. Well, you see, that's a result of our system, right? If we demanded it, then, well, I don't know if they could ever go back now.
Well, yeah.
This
What
is why I said we're over a tipping point here. We've gone that far. I know it. I see it. I see it in the equipment and the functioning. I got companies that are going out and spending a million, million and a half, $2 million on a piece of equipment that's all digital, of course. Maybe it's a shear or it's a whatever in a plant. And they bring it over here and they buy it from Europe or they buy it from somewhere. And everything is in European voltages. And it's not the voltage that's a problem. We can deal with that, but they can't get the stuff to work. And, I've said, well, like I can show you why, but you don't believe me. I said, keep putting your stuff on. Inevitably, they come back to me and say, well, hey, we got to fix this. I said, I know that, but you have to realize it, right?
yeah.
It's a big problem, Brandon. I mean, this is something that we've gotten into this rabbit hole now, and
Yeah, it's on one level, there's no going backwards. It's just like I think people are hungry for solutions that actually work, that it can at least remediate aspects,
mm,
if not the whole thing. There's no perfect solution or answer when we're talking about any of this stuff. And, fortunately, there's things that we can do to kind of have some level of mitigation, but
Mhm.
eventually we're going to have to kind of, and it's funny when you look at like what Tesla is doing with his unique form of air core transformers, where he's doing wireless transmissions that weren't very harmful for people back in the
Mhm.
Colorado Springs experiments and stuff like that. It's just like, where's this cleaner technology that could, it's just a lot of the stuff it's hard to put a meter on. I mean, as you know, if they could meter air that you're breathing, they'd probably tax you for it. So
Yeah.
it's like
Oh
there's
yeah. Yeah. Yeah, unfortunately.
yeah, so it's like it makes me wonder if it's possible to get to kind of a cleaner and more coherent way to transmit power that's maybe even beneficial. At the best, at the worst case, at least not harmful. I don't even really know if that's possible at this point.
Yeah, but that tipping point has come and gone. We we supply, the power that's coming. Nothing is going to change. It's going to get worse. And we are directly responsible for everything we buy and we utilize. And whether health was never brought into the equation until a few years ago. Was never. It was, oh, better TV, better pump. Oh, like we're gonna buy everything that's the best because hey, it's more efficient, takes less power to use. So we have given no thought to health, and we did not know what the side effects were going to be of all these products.
I mean, I would kind of argue that point. I mean, back in like you were referencing World War II era, where guys were warming themselves on microwave transmitters on submarines, they
Yeah,
knew the biological effects, the thermal heating, how it breaks protein structures. Like, I mean,
yeah,
60, 70 years ago at this point, like they had a lot of data, but there just weren't
yeah,
I don't know if it's an issue with things being so compartmentalized where they weren't like
yeah,
looking at the whole picture and they're just like super isolated and this is power, this is
yeah,
electricity, this is microwave weaponry, this is
yeah.
that. And they were actually like not really looking at the human or biological effects, even though they had these reports and these data points they could
Probably
reference.
didn't care. Probably didn't care, and
Yeah.
we're way more sophisticated now in our thought process than we ever were back then. You know, so I can understand that, what they went through. And, I'm not saying that the people down there back then didn't know, but they had a tendency to forgive it a lot easier than we do now because we have more knowledge.
Yeah.
So it's a big problem, and the power industry hates me. A lot of them do because I just tell it like it is. Um, and I understand they got their job to do.
Yeah.
But one thing that people don't realize, they blame it all on the power, all our problems. Our power is actually very clean. They're regulated to give us clean power. It's what used to be, and I teach this in courses when I give seminars. What used to be, you put a pie up and you segregate that into percentages, and 80% of all our entities, 20 years ago, used to come from the outside, from the power industry. 20% were from internal. Now it's like 85 or 90% come from internals
Wow.
and 10% comes from the power. So it's reversed. And so it's not our power, it's what we're doing in our buildings and our homes that's causing the issues, short of the smart meter. But
Is
all
that
the
just due to
entities,
everything we're adding onto the line
yes,
essentially?
yeah, are all our electronics, all our variable speed drives, all our lighting, all that is adding on to it's corrupting our power, but it's coming from inside the house and the building, not outside. So
So
people don't
really the
get that.
fix could be how we're the devices that we're plugging into the mains power, those need to be yeah, it makes sense too, because even in the electrotherapy space, everything's going digitized. Paul Harris, one of my friends and colleagues, he has one of the most, I think, sophisticated electrotherapy plasma machines on the market. He is adamant about it being all analog, just because it's more body friendly and everything. There's these micro breaks, obviously, with like digital signals that are like the stair step that have this kind of like punchier effect, and biology doesn't really like it so much, but almost every electrotherapy device I've been seeing, and that's why with the PEMF device I designed, I wanted it all analog. It has mechanical plasma gap control and everything, which
Mhm.
it's dial related. And yeah,
Wow.
it's
Old
interesting.
school. That's
Yeah,
old school.
it is old school, but the problem with the old school ones is like a lot of people are building them in a vacuum, and it's wear and tear on
Yeah.
parts, and the spark gap ends up getting, obviously you're putting that much voltage through it, an ampere, it's going to like, have effects where you need to basically calibrate the spark chamber every 200 hours. And if you machine it correctly, you can build it for longevity, and you don't have to
Hmm.
really deal with all the maintenance that goes along with these heavy
Well,
analog machines. So
also 10 to 100 times the size that it could be with electronics, right?
yeah,
That's one of the things that industry uses. Look at us. I can get that whole thing in. Well, look at our computers. I mean, you could take a laptop and you can run an Apollo 10 mission, you know,
yeah,
off your phone, right?
yeah,
So
so
that's
compact.
how
Yeah,
we've progressed. Well, so we think we've progressed, but there's always a price to pay for it. And so I encourage people to think and act and ask more questions.
absolutely. Well,
Yeah.
Terry, thanks so much. Hopefully we can have another conversation again
Oh,
and go even deeper.
anytime.
And yeah, I really appreciate your time and your knowledge base,
Yeah.
and your generosity with trying to actually help people understand this in a more significant and profound way. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. No problem. Anytime. I enjoyed it.
All right. Thanks,
Thanks,
Terry.
Brandon. Take
Bye.
care.